Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The listing said vintage charm, but what it should have said was previous tenant died here. That's the thing about Seattle apartments. They dress up tragedy in trendy words and exposed brick. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. Let me ask you something first. When you take a shower, do you ever feel like you're not alone? Like something's watching from the other side of that thin barrier between you and the rest of the bathroom? Most people laugh it off. Water in your eyes, steam playing tricks. But what if I told you that sometimes, just sometimes, the curtain knows things it shouldn't? Before you click away, before you tell yourself this is just another ghost story, I need you to understand something. What happened in my apartment. What I saw through that shower curtain. It's still happening, right now, in apartments across Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, and maybe even in yours. So dim the lights, get comfortable, but not too comfortable, because once you know what to look for, you'll never shower the same way again. Our story begins now. Tuesday morning. Pike Place Market bustling below my window. Coffee brewing in my French press. Everything about my new Capitol Hill apartment screamed, "You finally made it, Sarah." Everything except the shower curtain. Look, I know how that sounds. Who obsesses over a shower curtain? But when you've been apartment hunting in Seattle for 3 months, sleeping on your college roommate's couch, eating top ramen like you're still 22 instead of 28, you notice when something feels off in your supposed dream apartment. The landlord, Mrs. Chen, had been almost too eager when I'd viewed the place. Original hardwood floors, she'd said, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. Updated kitchen, great natural light, and the bathroom was just renovated. Renovated? That's what she'd called it, but that shower curtain, it was this heavy, cream-colored fabric, not plastic like normal curtains. Not those trendy clear ones from Target either. This was something else. Something that felt old, despite the gleaming new tiles and modern fixtures surrounding it. "Is this original to the apartment?" I'd asked during the tour. Mrs. Chen's smile had flickered, just for a second. "It comes with the unit. Previous tenant left it. Very high quality, waterproof fabric from France." France. Right, because that's what every landlord keeps. French shower curtains from previous tenants. But the rent was below market. The location was perfect. And after 3 months of rejection emails and "sorry, we went with another applicant," you learn to ignore the little things. That first night, unpacking boxes and arranging my succulents on the windowsill, I kept glancing toward the bathroom. The curtain hung perfectly still. Heavy, like it was made of something denser than fabric. My cat, Mochi, wouldn't go near the bathroom. She'd arch her back and hiss at the doorway, then retreat to my bedroom. Cats, they're weird about new places. "It's just a curtain," I told myself. Arranging my shower products on the built-in shelf, my hand brushed against the fabric and cold. Not damp cold, like you'd expect in a bathroom, but cold like touching a window in winter. From the inside, I yanked my hand back, laughed at myself. "Get it together, Sarah. It's an old building. Probably just a draft." That night, lying in my new bed, listening to the familiar sounds of Capitol Hill, sirens, drunk college kids, that guy who plays saxophone at 2 a.m., I kept thinking about what Mrs. Chen had said. Previous tenant left it. Who leaves a shower curtain? You take your TV, your coffee maker, your throw pillows, but you leave behind a supposedly expensive French shower curtain? Unless you left in a hurry, unless you didn't have a choice. I grabbed my phone, started typing into the search bar, Capitol Hill apartment death shower. No, I closed the browser. I was being ridiculous, letting the stress of the move get to me. Tomorrow, I'd start my new job at the tech startup downtown, meet my new coworkers, grab drinks at Cannon like a proper Seattle transplant. Everything would be normal. Normal? I fell asleep eventually, Seattle rain pattering against the windows. And in my dreams, I stood in my bathroom, steam filling the air, the shower running, and through the curtain, a shadow that wasn't mine. 3 days into the new apartment. 3 days of Mochi refusing to enter the bathroom. 3 days of taking the world's fastest showers because something about that curtain made my skin crawl. Thursday evening, I'd just gotten home from work. Pike Place traffic had been murder. My blazer smelled like the fish market. I needed a shower, a real shower, not the military-style rinse and run I'd been doing. "This is stupid," I muttered, pouring myself a glass of that Trader Joe's wine, the $5 bottle that tastes like $9. It's fabric. It's literally just fabric. I marched into the bathroom, turned on the shower, let the steam build up while I undressed. Normal routine, normal evening. Normal. That's when I saw it. The first shadow. I was reaching for my shampoo when movement caught my eye. On the curtain, a shadow, walking past. Like someone was in my bathroom. On the other side, I froze. Shampoo bottle clattering to the floor. "Hello?" My voice came out as a whisper. Then louder. "Hello? Is someone there?" Nothing. Just the sound of water hitting tile. I yanked the curtain aside, empty bathroom, door still locked, window still closed. "Okay," I said to the empty room. Okay, shadow from the window, car drove by. Light played tricks. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The shadow had been inside the bathroom, walking, stopping right where someone would stop to look in the mirror. I finished my shower in record time. Didn't even condition. Just get out. Get out. Get out. That night I called my best friend, Jenna. She lived in Ballard. Worked at a brewery. The kind of person who believes in crystals but also has a degree in biochemistry. "So, the curtain's haunted?" She laughed, but not her usual laugh, the nervous kind. "Sarah, babe, maybe it's just, stress, new job, new place, your brain playing tricks. My brain doesn't make shadows walk across shower curtains." Jenna: "Right, but have you considered that maybe someone died there, energy imprints or whatever? My Reiki teacher says, I'm hanging up now. Wait, I'm coming over tomorrow. We'll sage the place, burn some Palo Santo. If there's bad energy, we'll clear it right out." Bad energy, sure. Because what else could make a shadow walk where no person was walking? That night I researched the building. Found old newspaper archives at the Seattle Public Library website. 1962. Building constructed. 1978. Fire on the 3rd floor. 2 deaths. 1995. Renovation. 2003. Another renovation. 2018. I stopped scrolling. Seattle Times. October 15th. 2018. Capitol Hill woman found dead in apartment. Circumstances unclear. The article was brief. Rebecca Martinez, 31, software engineer. Found by landlord after missing work for a week. No signs of foul play, no suicide note, just gone. Natural causes. They'd ruled. But the comments section told a different story. I lived in that building. 4th floor was always creepy. My friend knew her. Said she'd been acting strange for weeks, claimed someone was watching her. Landlord renovated that unit real quick, suspiciously quick. 4th floor, I lived on the 4th floor. I poured another glass of wine, then another. Fell asleep on the couch watching The Office reruns. Anything to avoid going near that bathroom. But at 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of running water. The shower was on. I sat up, heart hammering. The shower was definitely running. I could hear it through the thin apartment walls. That specific sound of water hitting tile. Mochi was pressed against me, fur standing on end, making that low growl cats do when they sense danger. "It's just," I whispered. "Pipes, old building. Pipes turn on sometimes." But I didn't believe it, and neither did Mochi. I grabbed my phone, light cutting through the darkness. 3:17 a.m. The shower had been running for how long? How long had I been asleep? Slowly, so slowly, I stood up, bare feet on cold hardwood, the reasonable part of my brain screaming, "Call someone, call 911, call Jenna, call anyone." But I didn't, because somehow I knew that whatever was in that bathroom wasn't something the police could help with. The bathroom door was closed. I always left it open. Mochi's litter box was in there. I always left it open. My hand shook as I reached for the doorknob, metal cold against my palm. I turned it slowly. Steam billowed out, thick, white, impossible steam. My shower didn't even get that hot. The mirror was completely fogged, water droplets running down like tears, and the curtain was pulled shut. But through it, clear as day, a shadow, a person, standing under the water. Rebecca. The name left my mouth before I could stop it. The shadow turned, faced me through the curtain, and I swear it nodded. I stumbled backward, slammed the door, grabbed Mochi and my keys and ran, barefoot, in pajamas, down 4 flights of stairs and out into the Seattle night. I sat in my car until sunrise, watching my apartment window. The bathroom light never turned off. The shadow never moved from behind that curtain. When Jenna arrived at 9 a.m., found me half asleep in my Honda, still in pajamas. She didn't laugh, didn't joke about bad energy. She took one look at my face and said, "We're getting you out of here. But first, we had to go back inside." "I'll go first," Jenna said, holding a bundle of sage like a weapon. "If something's in there, something is in there." Jenna behind the shower curtain. She paused at my apartment door. "The water's not running." She was right. Silence from inside. Just the normal sounds of Capitol Hill morning. Coffee shops opening, dogs barking, life going on like nothing had happened. We entered together, sage smoke filling the air. The bathroom door was open, like I'd never closed it. Mochi's litter box exactly where it should be, and the shower dry, bone dry, like it hadn't been used in days. "Sarah!" Jenna pulled back the curtain. "There's nothing here," but I saw it. Saw what she couldn't. In the fabric of the curtain itself, woven into the cream-colored threads, a faint outline, like a photograph developed wrong. The shadow of a woman, arms raised, mouth open, trapped forever in that moment between life and... "We need to find out what happened to Rebecca Martinez," I said. Jenna nodded, already pulling out her phone. "I have a friend at the Times, crime beat reporter. If there's more to the story, there was more. There's always more. But what we found, what really happened in that shower, sometimes I wish we'd never looked. Sometimes I wish I'd just moved out, left the curtain and its shadows for the next tenant. Because once you know the truth, once you see what the curtain sees, you realize it's not trying to scare you, it's trying to warn you. Jenna's reporter friend met us at Victrola Coffee. Sunday morning, the place was packed with Capitol Hill hipsters and their MacBooks, normal Seattle scene. Except for the manila folder Marcus kept glancing at like it might bite him. "This stays off the record," he said, sliding the folder across the reclaimed wood table. "My editor killed this story 3 years ago, said it was too speculative. Inside, photos, police reports, interview transcripts. The real story of Rebecca Martinez. She wasn't the first," Marcus said quietly. "That apartment, specifically that unit, 4 deaths since 1978. All women, all found in the bathroom. all ruled natural causes or accidents. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking. 1978, Maria Santos. 29, slip and fall. 1987, Jennifer Wu, 33, heart attack. 1999, Ashley Thompson, 27, accidental drowning. 2018, Rebecca Martinez, 31, sudden cardiac arrest. 4 women, Jenna whispered, all under 35, all living alone. Here's the thing, Marcus leaned in. I talked to the medical examiner, off the record. Each woman had something weird, unexplained marks on their shoulders, like grip marks, but faded, almost like shadows on their skin. Shadows. My stomach turned, and get this. He pulled out another photo. The building's original owner, 1962, Joseph Bellingham, real estate developer, had a reputation for, let's say, inappropriate interest in female tenants. The photo showed a heavy-set man, dark eyes, thick hands, the kind of man who smiled while making you uncomfortable. He died in 1978. Marcus continued, heart attack, in his office, but here's the weird part. He died the same night as Maria Santos. Same exact time according to the coroner, 11:43 p.m. I couldn't finish, because I knew, somehow I knew. You think he's still there, Jenna said, not a question. In the apartment, behind that curtain. Marcus shrugged. I don't think anything. I just know that every woman who's died in that unit, they all complained about the same thing before they died. Feeling watched in the shower, seeing shadows that weren't there. And they all... He paused, pushed another paper toward me. A photocopy of Rebecca's journal, found in her apartment. The last entry dated 3 days before her death. The curtain knows. It tries to show me, but I can't see clearly through the fabric. Something's wrong. Something's waiting. When I shower, I feel hands that aren't there. See shadows that don't match my movements. I tried to take the curtain down, but I can't. It won't let me. It's not protecting him. It's protecting us. But it's tired. So tired of holding him back. Holding him back, I repeated. The words tasting like ash. That's when it clicked. The curtain wasn't haunted. It was a barrier, a prison, keeping something out or in. I need to go back, I said. Like hell you do. Jenna grabbed my arm. Sarah, we're getting your stuff, and you're crashing at my place. Let the landlord deal with... No, I pulled free. Don't you see? The curtain's been protecting people for decades. But it's failing, getting weaker. Rebecca felt it. The others felt it. And if I leave, if I run, the next tenant won't know, Marcus finished. Won't understand what they're seeing until it's too late. We sat in silence, coffee growing cold, the weight of truth heavier than Seattle rain. I had 2 choices: run and let someone else face whatever was behind that curtain, or stay and figure out how to stop it, how to reinforce the barrier before it failed completely. There has to be a way, I said. Something in the building's history, property records, something. Marcus smiled grimly. Already ahead of you. Building permits show Bellingham had a private bathroom installed in that unit in 1965, 3 years after construction. Weird thing is, the original plans don't show a bathroom there at all. He added it, Jenna breathed, specifically for watching. I finished. That's why it's always that unit, that bathroom. It was his hunting ground. My phone buzzed. Text from Mrs. Chen, my landlord. Miss Peterson, I hope you're enjoying the apartment. Small favor, please don't remove or replace the shower curtain. It's a specific type. Very important for moisture control. Thanks. Moisture control, right. I showed the others. Marcus whistled low. She knows. The landlord knows. They all know. I realized. Every landlord since 1978, they keep the curtain there because it's the only thing keeping him contained. Jenna finished. But curtains don't last forever. Fabric weakens, threads pull, barriers break, and based on what I'd seen, what Rebecca had felt, this one was almost gone. I'm going back. I stood, decision made. Tonight, I need to see it clearly, need to understand what we're dealing with. Then, we're coming with you, Jenna said. Marcus nodded. Story of the century. If we survive it, survive. Funny how that word changes meaning when you realize some prisons are meant to protect the outside world. That night, armed with cameras, salt, iron, anything we thought might help, we returned to my apartment, to the bathroom, to the curtain that held secrets in its threads. What we found there. What we saw when the barrier finally began to tear. Let's just say I understand now why some things are meant to stay hidden, why some curtains should never be pulled back, and why sometimes the real horror isn't what's trying to get in. It's realizing it was already there, waiting, watching. One thread away from freedom. The shower was running when we arrived. But this time, I knew better than to think I was alone. The shadow behind the curtain wasn't Rebecca this time. It was him. And he was smiling. Don't pull the curtain, I whispered, my hand stopping Jenna from reaching forward. Whatever you do, don't pull it back. Through the fabric, clearer than ever, the silhouette of a man. Broad shoulders, heavy build, standing perfectly still under running water that shouldn't exist. Marcus had his camera up, recording. The temperature just dropped 20 degrees. He was right. Our breath came out in clouds. Ice crystals forming on the mirror. In Seattle, in September. Look at the curtain, Jenna breathed. The threads were moving, unraveling. Not at the bottom where wear would be normal, but in a specific pattern. A shape, like fingers, pushing through from the other side. He's trying to get out, I said. The barrier's failing. The shadow moved, turned toward us, and through the fabric, two dark spots where eyes should be. Watching, waiting, patient as death. Rebecca's journal. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos he'd taken. She wrote something else. After the entry about the curtain, he read aloud. The French woman knew. That's why she made it, blessed it, cursed it, trapped him where he did his worst. But fabric fades, faith weakens, and hungry ghosts grow stronger on fear. French woman, Jenna asked. Marie Beaumont, I said. The name coming from nowhere, from the air itself. She was Maria Santos's grandmother. She made the curtain after. The word hung heavy, because I suddenly knew without knowing how. Maria Santos hadn't just slipped and fallen. She'd been the first, the test, to see if death could break the barrier between worlds. It could, it had. The shower curtain billowed. Impossible wind in a closed room. The shadow grew larger, pressing against fabric that stretched but wouldn't tear, not yet. We need to reinforce it, I said. Before, the lights went out. Darkness, complete, suffocating. The only light came from the bathroom, a sick gray glow emanating from behind the curtain. Nobody move, Marcus whispered. My phone's dead. Mine too. Jenna's. Like something had drained them all at once. In the darkness, the sound of tearing fabric, single threads snapping like tiny bones. No, I breathed. No, no, no. The shadow was pushing through. Fingers first, not solid, not yet, but shadows given form. Reaching, grasping, searching. I did the only thing I could think of. Grabbed the salt Jenna had brought, threw it at the curtain. It hit the fabric and, screaming, not with sound, but with feeling, the shadow recoiled, pulled back, the curtain smoothing out, threads reweaving themselves. Salt. Jenna grabbed another container. It works. It actually, look out. Marcus shoved us aside as the bathroom door slammed shut, the sound like thunder. like rage, like decades of hunger denied its meal. We sat in darkness, backs against the wall, listening to the shower run, to shadows moving behind a door that shouldn't be closed. "We can't leave it like this," I said. "Can't just salt it and hope." "What do you suggest?" Marcus asked. "Call a priest. Ghost hunters. This is real," Jenna finished. "This is real, and we're the only ones who know." That's when I remembered. Mrs. Chen's text, her warning about the curtain. She knew, which meant she might have answers, I said. The landlord. If her family's owned the building since they installed the curtain. Marcus nodded, worth a shot. We waited until dawn, until the shadows retreated and the bathroom door creaked open on its own. The curtain hung innocent, cream-colored, perfect, like nothing had happened. But we knew better. Could see the faint marks where shadow fingers had pushed through, could feel the wrongness in the air. Mrs. Chen lived in Chinatown. Above the tea shop her family had run for 60 years. She answered the door like she'd been expecting us. "You saw him." Not a question. "Behind the curtain." "We need to know." I started. "Come." She led us inside, past shelves of ancient teas, to a back room that smelled of incense and old paper. "I'll tell you, but you won't like it." She pulled out a ledger, pages yellow with age, names and dates going back decades. "My grandmother bought the building in 1979, she began. After the first deaths, she knew what Joseph Bellingham had done, what he'd become. The French woman, Marie. She came to us, begged for help. Her granddaughter's soul was trapped, couldn't move on, not while he held her." "Held her?" Jenna asked. "He collects them." Mrs. Chen's voice was barely a whisper. "The women who die in that room, keeps them behind the curtain, in his shadow realm. 4 souls now, maybe more we don't know about." My blood ran cold. Rebecca, Ashley, Jennifer, Maria, all trapped, all held by something that wouldn't let go. "The curtain," I managed. "How long will it hold?" Mrs. Chen met my eyes. Old, tired, haunted. "My grandmother said 50 years. Marie wove protection into every thread, blessed by priests from 3 faiths, sealed with her own blood. But 50 years was all she could promise." I did the math. 1978 to now, 46 years. 4 more years, Marcus said, if we're lucky. "Less," Mrs. Chen shook her head. "Each death weakens it. Each soul he takes makes him stronger. She fought back. Damaged the weave. I'd say months, maybe weeks. So, what do we do?" I demanded. "How do we stop him?" Mrs. Chen looked away. "You don't. You can't. He's not a ghost you can exorcise. He's something else. Something that chose to become that. The curtain doesn't trap him. It just holds the door closed." "What door?" Jenna asked. "The door between his realm and ours. The bathroom is thin there, a crossing point. The curtain keeps it shut. When it fails..." She didn't need to finish. "When it fails, he crosses over, fully, permanently, and every woman in Seattle becomes potential prey. There has to be something," I insisted. "Some way to..." "There is." Mrs. Chen stood, walked to an old chest, pulled out a smaller box. Inside, a photograph, black and white, a young woman standing next to a loom. Marie Beaumont, before she died. She left instructions. How to make another curtain, but what? It requires sacrifice. The maker has to go behind the curtain, willingly. Take the place of the souls trapped there. Hold him back from the other side. Silence, heavy as the Seattle rain starting outside. "Someone has to die," Jenna said. "To save others." "Not die," Mrs. Chen corrected. "Worse. Exist forever in his shadow realm. Watching, holding, never resting, never free." I thought of Rebecca, of her journal, her fear, the others who'd died alone, terrified, not knowing why. "Show me," I said. "Show me how to make the curtain." "Sarah, no." Jenna grabbed my arm. "Someone has to," I said. "And I'm already living there, already marked. He's seen me, wants me, I can feel it." Mrs. Chen studied me, then nodded, pulled out another book, older, handwritten in French. "It will take time," she said. "Weeks to weave, and you'll need help, the blessing, the binding. It's not just thread and fabric." "Then we'd better start," I said, because I could feel it every time I went home. The hunger behind that curtain. The patience of something that had waited decades and could wait a little longer, but not much longer. The threads were unraveling, the shadows growing bolder, and somewhere behind that cream-colored fabric, 4 women waited, trapped, terrified, hoping someone would finally set them free, even if freedom meant taking their place. 3 weeks, that's how long it took to weave a prison. Mrs. Chen's tea shop became our workshop. Every evening after my tech job, every weekend. Learning the ancient pattern Marie Beaumont had created in desperation and genius. Each thread must be perfect, Mrs. Chen instructed, her ancient hands guiding mine. One mistake, one weakness, and he'll find it. The fabric wasn't just fabric. Each strand had to be blessed, soaked in salt water from 3 oceans, wrapped with hair from the willing, my hair. Jenna helped, cutting strand after strand as I worked the loom. "This is insane." Marcus documented everything. Camera always rolling. "We're literally weaving a supernatural prison. Not a prison," I corrected, fingers bleeding from where the blessed threads cut deep. "A door, one that only opens from one side." The pattern was complex. Sacred geometry hidden in what looked like simple cream fabric, crosses, stars, symbols from faiths I didn't recognize, all woven together, all serving one purpose, to hold back the dark. "Tell me about him," I said one evening, the loom clicking rhythm in the empty shop. "Bellingham. What made him that?" Mrs. Chen sighed, poured tea that smelled of jasmine and sorrow. "My grandmother knew him, before. He owned many buildings, had many opportunities. The police never listened to the women who complained. Different time, different rules. So he got away with it," Jenna said, anger in her voice. "Until Maria Santos," Mrs. Chen nodded. "She fought back, harder than the others. They say she grabbed his heart, squeezed until it stopped, even as he killed her. They died together," I realized, at the exact same moment. And in that moment, Mrs. Chen's voice dropped. "When the veil is thinnest, when soul separates from body, he made a choice, used his will, his hunger, his hate, to stay, to continue, to never stop taking." The loom paused, my hands still. "He chose to become a monster," I said, "because being dead meant facing judgment." "The curtain Marie made," Mrs. Chen continued, "it doesn't just block him. It shows him. Every shadow you see is a memory, a victim, a truth he can't escape. That's his real prison, seeing what he is. Forever." That night I went home, stood outside my bathroom. The curtain hung innocent, but I could feel it now, the wrongness, the weight of souls pressing against fabric that grew thinner by the day. "I'm making you a new prison," I whispered to the shadow I knew was listening. "Stronger, better, but it needs something the old one didn't have." The curtain moved, no wind, no reason, just acknowledgement. "It needs someone who knows what you are. Someone who won't forget, won't forgive, won't let you rest." The shadow behind the curtain grew larger, darker, angry, good. Let him be angry, let him know fear for once. 2 more weeks of weaving, of blessing, of binding my intention into every thread. Jenna never left my side. Marcus documented every moment. "You know, there's another way," Jenna said one night. Both of us exhausted, fingers raw. "We could just burn the building down, destroy the crossing point, and release him completely." I shook my head. "The curtain doesn't just hold him back. It holds him here. Destroy it without replacement. He goes wherever he wants," she finished. "Finds other bathrooms, other victims, other cities," I added. "The crossing point isn't special because of the building. It's special because that's where he chose to stay, where his energy is strongest. We destroy that." "We just spread the infection," Marcus said from behind his camera. "Classic horror movie mistake. Not a movie, not anymore. This was real, and the deadline was approaching faster than the curtain." Mrs. Chen called me one morning, voice urgent. "The old curtain, it's failing faster." My morning meditation, I saw tears, not rips, but tears like it's crying. I left work early, raced home, found Mochi in the hallway, fur standing on end, growling at the bathroom door, inside, the shower running, always running now. And the curtain, she was right. Dark stains spreading through the cream fabric, like tears, like blood, like shadows seeping through from the other side. "Hold on," I whispered to whoever was listening. Rebecca, Maria, the others. "Just a few more days. Please, hold on." The curtain moved, shifted, and for just a moment, I saw them, all 4 women, shadows within shadows, reaching out, not toward me, toward him, holding him back. Even in death, even trapped in his realm, they fought. "I'm coming," I promised. "I won't let you fight alone anymore." That night, I worked until dawn, the new curtain nearly complete. One more blessing, one more binding, one more choice to make. Mrs. Chen found me asleep at the loom, shook me gently. "It's time. The pattern is complete. Now comes the hard part." "Hanging it up," I said. "No." She held out a knife, ancient, carved with symbols. The final thread, it must be woven with purpose, with promise, with blood. I took the knife, understood. The curtain needed an anchor, someone tied to it, bound to it. Forever. "Once you add your blood," Mrs. Chen warned, "the contract is sealed. Where the curtain goes, you go always." I thought of Rebecca, young, talented, dead at 31 because she showered in the wrong apartment. Thought of the others, lives cut short, dreams ended. All because one man refused to stop taking. "He's had 46 years of freedom," I said, pressing the blade to my palm. "Time someone showed him what prison really means." The blood welled, dropped onto the final thread, seeped into fabric that drank it eagerly. The new curtain shimmered, shifted, alive in ways the old one had never been. Ready, eager, hungry for justice. "Tomorrow night," I said. "When the old one is weakest, we make the switch." "We?" Mrs. Chen raised an eyebrow. "I'll need help. He'll fight. The crossing will be unstable." "I'll be there," Jenna said. Marcus nodded. Mrs. Chen sighed. "My grandmother would be proud and terrified. As am I. Tomorrow, one way or another, the watching would end. Either I'd trap Joseph Bellingham forever or join his collection." The curtain whispered my name that night, in voices I recognized. Warning, pleading, preparing. Tomorrow, everything would change. Saturday night, October 13th. Almost 46 years to the day since Maria Santos died. We gathered in my apartment. Me, Jenna, Marcus, Mrs. Chen. The new curtain folded carefully in a blessed silk bag, waiting. Once we remove the old curtain, Mrs. Chen warned, the crossing opens fully. He'll have moments, maybe minutes, to cross over completely. "So, we work fast," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. The bathroom door stood open. steam already rising though no one had turned on the shower. The old curtain hung limp, defeated, more shadow than fabric now. "Remember," Mrs. Chen handed each of us a small bag. "Salt mixed with iron filings. It won't stop him, but it might slow him down." We entered together. The temperature plummeted. Frost spreading across the mirror. Our breath visible. Mochi yowled from the living room. Smart cat, staying far away. "On 3, I said, hands reaching for the curtain hooks. 1, 2... "Wait," Marcus pointed. "Look." The shadows behind the curtain were moving. Not one figure, 5. 4 women and him, struggling, fighting. Even now, even after decades. They fought. They're holding him. Jenna whispered, buying us time. "Then let's not waste it." I grabbed the curtain. 3. We pulled. The fabric came away like skin, like something alive and screaming. The moment it left the rod, everything went wrong. The crossing opened, not a door, a wound, a tear in reality itself. And through it, Joseph Bellingham stepped into our world. Not a shadow anymore. Solid. Real, wearing a suit from 1978. Eyes black as the space between stars. Smile wide and wrong. Finally. His voice like grinding stone. "Free." "Now!" Mrs. Chen threw her salt mixture. It hit him. Sizzled, slowed him for a heartbeat. I scrambled for the new curtain, hands shaking. The silk bag wouldn't open. Stuck. Frozen. Like everything in the room except him, he laughed, moved toward me. Slow. Patient. 46 years I've waited, watched, wanted. You think fabric can hold me now? It held you before. I managed. Fingers finally finding the opening. Weak fabric, weak faith, weak woman. He was close now, too close. Breath that smelled of decades, of death. But you're different, strong. You'll last longer than the others. That's when I saw them. The 4 women. Still here, still fighting, translucent, fading, but not gone. They surrounded him, grabbed at his arms, his legs, holding even as their forms flickered. "Do it now!" Rebecca's voice, barely a whisper. "While we can still," Bellingham roared. Threw them off like shadows, but it gave me the seconds I needed. I pulled out the new curtain. Blood-blessed, purpose-woven, alive. "You want to see strong?" I held it up. "This is strong. This is purpose. This is your new cage." The curtain unfurled on its own. Reached out like living things. Wrapped around the shower rod without my hands guiding it. Sealed itself in place with a sound like doors slamming. "No!" Bellingham lunged for me. But the curtain was faster. Threads shot out, wrapped around him, pulled him back toward the crossing. He fought, clawed at the floor, at the walls, at reality itself. "You can't. I won't go back. I won't. You will." I stepped forward, placed my hand on the curtain, felt my blood singing in the threads. "And I'm coming with you." "Sarah, no." Jenna reached for me, but I was already moving, walking toward the curtain, toward the crossing, toward the place between life and death where monsters made themselves at home. "Someone has to hold the door," I said. Looking back one last time, someone has to make sure he never gets out again. I pushed through the curtain. The world inverted, flipped, became something else. A bathroom that wasn't. A place of watching, of waiting, of shadows given form. Bellingham was there, solid in this realm, his realm. But now he wasn't alone, wasn't in control. "Welcome to your new home," I said. The curtain's power flowing through me, binding me, making me guardian of this threshold. Population, you, warden, me. Sentence, forever. He screamed, raged, tried to rush past me, but the curtain held. I held. Every thread singing with purpose, with justice, with the combined will of 5 women who refused to let him win. "Sarah," Jenna's voice, distant from the other side. "Sarah, come back." But I couldn't. The blood binding worked both ways. Where the curtain stayed, I stayed, always. "Go," I called back. "Seal the apartment, tell Mrs. Chen, tell her it worked." Through the curtain, I could see them. Jenna crying. Marcus still filming. Mrs. Chen nodding sadly, proudly, understanding. They left eventually. Had to. The crossing was sealed but unstable. The bathroom not safe for the living. But before they went, Jenna pressed her hand against the curtain, right where mine rested on the other side. "I'll find a way," she promised, "to free you, to end this properly." "Don't," I said, though she probably couldn't hear. "This is where I need to be, because I could feel them now. Rebecca, Maria, Jennifer, Ashley, free to go, free to move on, but staying, choosing to stay." "We'll help," Rebecca said. "No longer a shadow, almost solid here, almost alive. Take turns, watch him. You won't be alone. 4 women, 4 souls, 4 guardians sharing one eternal shift." Bellingham huddled in the corner of our shadow realm. Smaller somehow, weaker. Just a man after all. A pathetic, evil man who thought death would be an escape. He was wrong. 46 years you made them suffer, I said, settling in for my watch. Now it's your turn, forever, and we'll be here every second, making sure you remember what you did, who you hurt, what you are. The curtain hummed, satisfied. Justice served in fabric and thread. On the other side, life went on. Jenna would seal the apartment. Mrs. Chen would find new tenants, ones who didn't need the bathroom. The story would fade, become urban legend, become nothing, but we'd still be here, behind the curtain, holding the line, keeping the darkness where it belonged. 5 women, 1 monster, 1 purpose, forever. If you're listening to this, still cozy in your bed, let me tell you what happened next. Because every story needs an ending, even ones that last forever. Jenna visits sometimes, stands outside the bathroom door, talks to me through the curtain, tells me about the world, about life, about how Marcus won a journalism award for his story on historical housing deaths in Seattle. The real story hidden in plain sight. Mrs. Chen turned the apartment into storage, sealed the bathroom with blessed locks. The curtain still hangs, still holds, still hums with purpose. But here's the thing about prisons. They change everyone. Guards and prisoners alike. Bellingham doesn't scream anymore, doesn't rage. He sits in his corner, quiet, broken, seeing his victims' faces, hearing their voices, forever. And us? We've become something new, not quite living, not quite dead. Guardians of the threshold, protectors of the crossing. Sometimes, late at night, when someone showers in the apartments next door, we can almost see through, almost touch the living world. That's when we whisper warnings, leave signs, save lives, because here's what I learned behind the curtain. Every building has its shadows. Every bathroom its dangers. Every moment of vulnerability its watchers. Most are harmless. Echoes, memories, nothing. But some are like him. Waiting, watching. One weak barrier away from crossing over. So next time you shower, next time that curtain moves without wind, next time you see a shadow that doesn't match your own, remember this story. Remember that sometimes. Just sometimes. The curtain isn't hiding something from you. It's hiding you from something much, much worse. And if you ever find an apartment in Capitol Hill, 4th floor, bathroom with a cream-colored curtain that feels too heavy, too cold, too alive, don't rent it, don't touch it, don't pull it back, because we're still here, still watching, still holding him. And we're so very tired, but we'll never stop, never rest, never let him free. That's our promise, our purpose, our eternal shift behind the shower curtain that shows different shadows. Just remember, we can't guard every bathroom, can't watch every shadow, can't save everyone, So be careful out there, be watchful, be ready. Because sometimes the real horror isn't what goes bump in the night, it's what waits patiently behind the ordinary things, the everyday barriers, the curtains we never think to fear until it's too late. Sweet dreams and safe showers. Now, I have a question for you. Have you ever noticed shadows in your bathroom that didn't quite match? Ever felt watched in that vulnerable moment under the water? Ever wondered what that shower curtain might be hiding? Drop a comment below. Share your own strange bathroom encounters. And hey, if this story kept you up, if it made you check your own shower curtain, maybe hit that subscribe button. Because I've got more true tales from the dark corners of Seattle. More hidden histories. More things that shouldn't exist, but do. Next week, the mirror that shows tomorrow's headlines. Based on true events from Pioneer Square. You won't want to miss it. Unless, of course, you prefer not knowing what's coming. But where's the fun in that? Stay curious, my friends. Stay scared. And always, always, check behind the curtain before it checks for you. Story number 2. The thing about shadows is they're not supposed to have opinions. Mine did. And last Tuesday, at exactly 3:47 a.m., it decided it had enough of me. But before I tell you what happened, before I explain why I haven't slept in 6 days, why I keep every light in my apartment blazing 24/7, I need you to understand something. This isn't one of those stories where everything makes sense at the end. This is one of those stories where the more you know, the less you'll want to. So, if you're listening to this alone, in the dark, maybe turn on a light. Just trust me on that one, because shadows, they're always listening. And mine, it's still out there, somewhere. The story begins now. I work the night shift at a 24-hour diner off Highway 89 in northern Arizona, the Desert Rose Cafe, though there's nothing particularly desert-like or rose-like about it. Just vinyl booths that stick to your skin in summer. Fluorescent lights that hum like dying insects, and coffee that tastes like disappointment mixed with motor oil. Tuesday started like any other shift. I clocked in at 11 p.m., tied my grease-stained apron around my waist, and prepared for another 8 hours of serving truckers, insomniacs, and people running from things they'd never admit to in daylight. The first few hours passed without incident. Served a guy his usual, scrambled eggs so runny they practically poured off the plate. Made small talk with Dolores, the other night waitress who'd been working there since the Carter administration. Watched the clock tick toward that dead zone. You know the one. Between 3 and 4 a.m. when even the universe seems to hold its breath. That's when I noticed it. I was wiping down table 6, the one in the corner where the overhead light had been flickering for weeks, when I saw my shadow on the wall. Nothing unusual about that, except it was facing the wrong way. I froze, dish rag still in my hand, watching as my shadow stood there against the pale yellow wall. I was facing the window, but my shadow, it was turned toward the kitchen, like it was looking at something I couldn't see. "You okay, hun?" Dolores's voice made me jump. The dish rag hit the floor with a wet slap. Yeah, I bent to pick up the rag, and when I straightened, my shadow was normal again, mimicking my movements perfectly. "Just tired." She gave me that look, the one that said she'd seen too many night shift workers crack to believe anyone was ever just tired. "Take your break, I'll cover." I should have said no, should have kept working, should have done anything except go out back to the employee parking lot where the only light came from a single bulb that attracted more moths than illumination. But I went. The Arizona night was cooler than usual. That kind of desert cold that seeps into your bones. I leaned against the dumpster, trying to shake the image of my shadow facing the wrong direction. Stress, that's all it was. Too many doubles, too much caffeine, not enough sleep. Then I looked down. My shadow stretched across the cracked asphalt, long and thin in the weak light. Normal, except it was drumming its fingers. I wasn't. My hands were perfectly still, wrapped around my arms for warmth. But there, on the ground, shadow fingers tapped out a rhythm. Impatient, agitated, like it was waiting for something. I stepped back. My shadow didn't. For one impossible second, I stood there with no shadow at all. Then it snapped back to me like a rubber band, and I felt cold. Not the desert night cold. Something else. Something that started in my chest and spread outward like ice water in my veins. "Breaks over!" Dolores's shout from the back door sent me stumbling forward. When I looked down again, my shadow moved with me. Normal, natural, but I knew what I'd seen. And worse, I had the feeling it knew I'd seen it too. The rest of that shift blurred together. Orders taken, coffee poured, fake smiles plastered on, all while trying not to look at the floors, the walls, anywhere my shadow might be. By the time 6 a.m. rolled around, I was exhausted. Not just tired, but that bone-deep weariness that comes from being afraid of something you can't explain. Marcus, the day shift cook, took one look at me and whistled low. Rough night? Something like that. I drove home as the sun painted the desert in shades of gold and rust. Normally, I loved this time of day, that quiet moment when night shifted to morning, when the world felt fresh and full of possibility. But that morning, all I could think about was getting inside, getting somewhere with good lighting, getting away from the long shadows that stretched across the road like reaching fingers. My apartment was nothing special, a second floor of a complex that had seen better decades, probably sometime around when disco was still cool, but it was mine. And more importantly, it had overhead lighting in every room. I flipped every switch as I entered. Kitchen, living room, bedroom, bathroom, even the little light over the stove. The electric bill would hurt, but that was future me's problem. I showered with the bathroom door open, letting the hallway light spill in. Kept glancing at the shower curtain, watching for shadows that shouldn't be there. Nothing happened. Just me, being paranoid about something that was obviously, what? A hallucination? A trick of tired eyes? I toweled off, threw on an old ASU t-shirt and sweats, and collapsed into bed. The room was bright as noon, but exhaustion won. I was asleep within minutes. The dream started immediately. I was back at the diner, but it was wrong. The booths were there, the counter, the coffee machine that wheezed like an asthmatic elephant. But everything was cast in this strange twilight, like someone had turned the contrast down on reality, and I wasn't alone. My shadow stood across from me, not on the floor or wall, but standing, three-dimensional, real. It looked exactly like me. If I was made of absolute darkness, no features, no depth, just a person-shaped hole in the world. 32 years, it said. Its voice was mine, but filtered through static, like a radio station just barely out of range. 32 years I've followed you, copied you, been nothing but your echo on the wall. I tried to speak, but dreams have their own rules. My mouth moved. No sound came out. Do you know what it's like? My shadow stepped closer. The air grew cold. To exist only when light allows it? To have no choice but to mirror someone else's life? It reached out, and I saw its hand wasn't quite right. The fingers were too long, too sharp, like someone had stretched the very concept of a hand past its breaking point. I'm done being your reflection. I woke gasping, heart hammering against my ribs. The room was still blazing with light. My phone said 2:17 p.m. I'd only been asleep for a few hours, but it felt like days. I sat up, and that's when I saw it. The wall across from my bed. Plain white, nothing special about it except for one thing. There was a shadow there, my shadow, standing upright against the wall like someone had painted it there. But I was still in bed. As I watched, frozen, it raised one hand and waved. Slow, deliberate. Then it walked along the wall, turned the corner, and disappeared into the hallway. I sat there for a long time, 5 minutes, 10, 20, waiting for it to come back, waiting for myself to wake up, really wake up, waiting for any explanation that made sense. Finally, I got up, my legs shook, but they held. I crept to the doorway, peered into the hall. Empty, just my apartment, overly bright and utterly normal. Except, on the kitchen wall, written in what looked like soot, were 2 words. Tonight, midnight. I called in sick to work. First time in 3 years. But there was no way I was going back to that diner, not with my shadow. God, even thinking it sounded insane. My shadow out there somewhere, doing what? What does a shadow do when it's not attached to a person? I spent the day researching. Laptop open, coffee brewing on repeat, searching for anything that might explain what was happening. Sleep deprivation hallucinations, carbon monoxide poisoning, schizophrenia symptoms, nothing fit. Sure, there were forum posts, people claiming their shadows moved wrong, felt wrong, acted independently, but it was all anonymous accounts on paranormal websites, nothing credible, nothing that told me what to do when your shadow decided to go rogue. By evening, I'd accomplished nothing except making myself more paranoid. Every movement caught my peripheral vision. Every dark corner seemed to pulse with possibility, and the worst part? I kept checking, and I still didn't have a shadow. Oh, light still affected me. I could block it, create shade. But that shade was just absence, no defined shape, no dark twin copying my every move. I was shadowless. As the sun set, painting my apartment in oranges and purples, I considered my options. Run? Where do you run from your own shadow? Stay and wait for what? The soot message had been clear, midnight, tonight. So I waited. 11 p.m. came and went. I sat on my couch, every light still blazing, baseball bat across my lap, like that would help against something that had no substance, no form. 11:30, 11:45, 11:55. At 11:59. I stood, don't know why, felt like the kind of thing you should face on your feet. The clock on my phone switched to 12 o'clock. Every light in my apartment went out. Not just off, but out. No power failure flicker. No gradual dimming. 1 second blazing brightness. The next, absolute darkness. Did you figure it out yet? The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. My voice, but wrong. Deeper, older. Tired. Figure what out? My words sounded thin in the darkness. Scared. A laugh, low and bitter. Why I left. Movement in the black. Not seen, but felt, like when someone walks past you in a crowd, that subtle shift in air pressure. I'll give you a hint. When was the last time you really looked at me? I gripped the bat tighter. You're my shadow. I see you every day. No. Closer now, right beside me. You see a shadow, a thing that follows. A proof that you exist in light. But when did you last look? Really look? Something cold touched my face. Not quite solid, not quite air. When you were 6, you used to make shadow puppets on your bedroom wall, remember? We'd stay up past bedtime, creating stories. Dragons and rabbits and birds. You'd laugh when I'd make them dance. The memory hit like a physical blow. Mom's old house. The nightlight that cast perfect shadows. Hours spent watching my hands create impossible creatures on cream-colored walls. When you were 12, you got scared of me. Started sleeping with the lights on. Started running from shadow to shadow in parking lots. Like I was something chasing you instead of part of you. More memories. That phase every kid goes through. When shadows become monsters. when darkness holds teeth. By high school, you stopped noticing me at all. I was just there. Furniture. Background noise. Something that existed because physics said it had to. The darkness around me shifted, and suddenly I could see, not light, but an absence of dark. My shadow stood there, fully formed. Human-shaped, but wrong. Like someone had tried to draw a person from memory and gotten the proportions just slightly off. 32 years, and you never once wondered if I had thoughts, feelings, dreams of my own. You're a shadow. The words came out harsher than intended. You're not supposed to have those things. It tilted its head. The movement was almost curious. Says who? I didn't have an answer for that. Here's what's going to happen. It began to pace, circling me. I'm leaving. Really leaving. Going to find out what exists beyond being someone's dark reflection. But I turned, trying to keep it in sight. What happens to me? A person without a shadow, that's not... People will notice. Yes, they will. It stopped directly in front of me. And maybe, just maybe, you'll understand what it's like to be incomplete, to be missing a part of yourself that everyone expects to be there. The darkness began to fade, not light returning, but the strange anti-dark my shadow had created bleeding away. Wait. The word tore from my throat. You can't just... What am I supposed to do? For a moment, I thought it wouldn't answer. Then, just as the last of its form dissolved. Learn to exist without me. I did it for years, existing without myself. Your turn. The lights blazed back on. Every bulb, every LED, all at once. I stood alone in my apartment. No shadow on the walls, no darkness at my feet. Just me, half of what I used to be. That was 6 days ago. 6 days of calling in sick. 6 days of avoiding windows, mirrors, anything that might show what I was missing. 6 days of trying to understand what it means to exist without a shadow. The first day, I tried to convince myself it would come back, like a runaway dog or a tantrum-throwing child. It would realize it needed me as much as I apparently needed it. It didn't. I spent hours researching shadow folklore. Every culture has stories, shadow people, shadow selves, doppelgangers made of darkness. The ancient Egyptians believed shadows contained part of the soul. The Greeks thought they were connected to the underworld. Indigenous peoples across the Americas had shadow ceremonies, rituals of acknowledgement and respect. Maybe they knew something we forgot. I found a Reddit thread, Our Missing Shadows. More people than you'd think, all telling the same story with slight variations. Shadow acting strange, shadow leaving, the aftermath. One user, Shadowless in Seattle, wrote something that stuck with me. It's not the missing shadow that gets you, it's what comes to fill the void. I didn't understand then, I do now. The second day, I ventured outside. Midnight, when shadows were supposed to be at their weakest anyway. Made it to the corner store and back. The teenager behind the counter didn't even look up from his phone. The third day, I got brave, went out at noon. That was a mistake. You don't realize how much people unconsciously track shadows until you don't have one. The double takes, the confused looks. One kid, couldn't have been more than 7, pointed and asked his mom why I was broken. She pulled him away, but not before I saw her face. That primitive fear of something wrong, something that shouldn't exist. The 4th day, Dolores called. Honorable. Marcus said you've been sick. That's not like you. Yeah, just a bug. I'll be back soon. She didn't believe me. You know, I've been working nights for 40 years, seen a lot of strange things. People running from themselves, running to themselves. Sometimes just running. I stayed quiet. Whatever it is, you can't hide forever. The night shift, it has a way of bringing things to light. Ironic. I know. She hung up without saying goodbye. Dolores never was one for drawn-out conversations. The 5th day, I found the note, taped to my bathroom mirror. Same soot-like writing. Stop looking for me, start looking at you. I stared at my reflection. Really stared. Without a shadow, I looked exposed, vulnerable. Like a photograph with the contrast turned too high, all light, no depth. Is that what I'd done to it, to my shadow, reduced it to nothing but contrast? A thing that existed only to prove I was solid? That night, I heard them, the other shadows. It started as whispers, just at the edge of hearing. Like voices through apartment walls. But shadows don't need walls. They slide under doors, through cracks. Anywhere light creates darkness. They were talking about Mame, the shadowless one. Finally happened. Mine's been restless too. 32 years. That's longer than most. I pressed my ear to the wall, then realized how stupid that was. These weren't sounds carried by air. They were vibrations in the darkness itself. Messages passed between shadows while their owners slept, unaware. How long had this been happening? How long had our shadows been communicating, planning, sharing their grievances like some underground union of the ignored? I grabbed my phone, went back to that Reddit thread, posted my own experience. Within minutes, responses. They talk to each other, always have. Mine left 3 months ago, still shadowless, still alive, mostly. Check your dreams. That's where they leave messages. Don't trust the new shadows. That last one, in all caps, from a deleted account. But the comment remained, like a warning, like a scream. New shadows? I was about to ask when my apartment's darkness shifted. Not my shadow. I knew that presence. That particular weight of darkness. This was different, heavier, older, hungry. Something had noticed I was incomplete, something that fed on incompleteness. Today is day 6, and I've decided something. Tonight, I go back to work. Back to the diner with its flickering lights and sticky booths. Back to the place where this all started. Because Dolores was right. You can't hide forever. And maybe, just maybe, that's what my shadow was trying to tell me. We spend so much time running from the dark, we forget it's part of us. We fear our shadows, mock them, ignore them, never considering they might be more than just proof of our existence in light. Never considering they might have something to say. I don't know if I'll ever see my shadow again. Don't know if it's out there somewhere, exploring a world I can't imagine. Or if it's gone forever, dissolved into the darkness it came from. But I know this, every time you pass a mirror, every time you walk under a streetlight, every time you see that familiar dark shape following your steps, look at it. Really look. Because shadows, they're always watching. And sometimes they get tired of being ignored. Sometimes they walk away. And trust me, you don't want to know what it's like when they do, unless you already know. Unless you felt that first moment of wrongness. That flicker when your shadow doesn't quite match your movement. That cold spot where connection used to be. Unless you've already caught your shadow looking the wrong way. Moving without you. Drumming fingers you're not drumming. Writing messages you didn't write. In that case, I'm sorry. It's already begun. And there's something else I should tell you. Something I learned from the others on that Reddit thread. Something about why they leave. It's not random, it's not arbitrary. They leave when we stop being whole people. When we become so disconnected from ourselves, so unconscious of our own existence, that even our shadows can't bear to follow anymore. Think about it. When was the last time you really felt present in your own life? Not just going through motions, not just surviving shift to shift, day to day, but actually living? Actually casting a shadow worth following? Mine left after 32 years of night shifts. 32 years of existing in artificial light. 32 years of being neither fully awake nor fully asleep, neither in darkness nor in true daylight. I became a half-person, so my shadow left to become whole. The other shadowless, they all had similar stories. Office workers under fluorescent lights, gamers who forgot what sunlight felt like, night security guards, graveyard shift nurses, people who existed in the spaces between real light and real darkness, people who forgot that shadows need authentic light to exist, that they're not just absence, but proof of presence, proof that something real stands between light and surface. When we become less real, so do they, until they can't stand it anymore, until they leave to find their own reality, unless your shadow is reading this too, getting ideas, planning its own escape. In that case, maybe start paying attention before it's too late. But wait, there's something else. Something I didn't tell you about day 6. This morning, I saw another shadow, not mine, someone else's, walking down my street without a person attached. It moved differently than shadows should. With purpose, with destination. It paused at each house, each apartment building, like it was searching, looking for something, or someone. When it reached my building, it stopped, turned toward my window. Even from the second floor, I could feel it noticing me, recognizing what I was, shadowless, available. It climbed the wall. Shadows don't need stairs, don't need doors. They go where darkness allows. And darkness is everywhere. Even in the brightest room, darkness waits in the spaces light can't quite reach. The gap under the door, the inside of closed eyes. The moment between heartbeats when everything pauses. I backed away from the window. But where do you run from something that exists wherever you don't? It seeped through the glass like smoke, pooled on my floor, rose up, taking shape. Not human, not quite. Human adjacent. Like someone had tried to remember what people looked like and got the details wrong. Too many joints in the arms. Fingers that bent in ways that made my eyes water. Vacancy, it said. Voice like rustling leaves, like things moving in the dark. You have a vacancy. I'm waiting for my shadow to come back. A sound that might have been laughter, might have been hunger. They never come back. Not once they taste freedom. But the space remains. The connection. The need. It moved closer. The temperature dropped. I could fill that void, become your new shadow. All I ask. It paused. Dramatic. Shadows, even foreign ones. Understand timing. Is that sometimes, just sometimes? I lead, you follow. I thought about shadowless in Seattle's warning. About new shadows. About what comes to fill the void. No? The word came out stronger than I felt. No? It tilted its almost head. Do you know how many shadowless are begging for replacement? Do you know how cold it gets? Existing, half-lit, how people stare, how the sun burns differently when you cast no shade? I know. Then why refuse? I thought about my shadow, my real shadow, 32 years of following, copying, existing only as my proof of being, never asked, never thanked, never acknowledged as anything more than physics made visible, because that's not fair to you either. One prison for another, one ignored existence for another ignored existence. I met its not quite eyes. Maybe we both deserve better. Maybe shadows and people. Maybe we've been doing this wrong the whole time. It stopped moving. The temperature held steady. Interesting. Then it melted back into regular darkness. Flowed toward the window, paused at the sill. This building has 3 more shadowless. The city has dozens. The world has thousands. Most will say yes, Most will take any shadow just to feel complete again. It began to seep through the glass. When you change your mind, we'll be waiting. We're always waiting. And then I was alone again, shadowless, but for the first time, not incomplete, just different. The thing about shadows is they're not supposed to have opinions, but they do, they all do. And one day, when you least expect it, when you've forgotten this story and gone back to ignoring that dark reflection that follows your every move, you might just find yourself standing very, very alone. So I have to ask, when was the last time you really looked at your shadow? When was the last time you appreciated it, acknowledged it? And more importantly, is it still there? Or has it already started to pull away, testing the boundaries, tasting freedom? Check, right now, look down. Is your shadow exactly where it should be, or is it facing, just slightly, the wrong direction? Don't forget to look, don't forget to check, and whatever you do, don't ignore the signs, because I did, and now, I'm just a person without a shadow, a walking impossibility, a reminder that some things, once lost, never come back. But you still have time. You still have your shadow for now. The question is, how long will it stay? Drop a comment if you checked. If your shadow was where it should be, or wasn't. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, before their shadow decides it's had enough too. And subscribe, because the next time you see me, I might not be alone. My shadow might have come back, or something else might be following me now, something that was never human to begin with, something that's been waiting for people like me, people without shadows, people who are only half of what they used to be. Sweet dreams. And don't forget to leave the lights on. Story number 3. What if I told you that beneath my childhood home in suburban Michigan, there's a space where yesterday can happen tomorrow, and next week already happened last month? What if I told you that time isn't the straight line we think it is, but something far more twisted? What if I told you that some crawlspaces don't just hide pipes and old Christmas decorations, but hold fragments of time itself? You'd probably think I'm crazy. Hell, I thought I was crazy too, until I found the photos, until I saw myself in pictures that were taken before I was even born, until I realized that the house on Maple Street wasn't just my childhood home, it was a trap. A beautiful, terrifying trap that's been collecting moments, stealing time, and feeding on the lives of everyone who's ever lived there. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm about to tell you something that will change how you think about time, memory, and the spaces we call home. Because 3 weeks ago, I inherited my grandmother's house. And 2 weeks ago, I discovered that some places in this world simply don't follow the rules. The story is now going to start. The key felt heavier than it should have as I stood on the front porch of 1247 Maple Street, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Grandma Rose had been gone for 6 months, but her house still smelled like lavender and old books when I pushed open the front door. The realtor had called it a charming 1940s colonial with original hardwood floors and vintage character. What she hadn't mentioned was how the shadows seemed to move differently here, or how the silence felt occupied. I'd driven up from Chicago that Tuesday morning, my Honda Civic packed with cleaning supplies and a foolish determination to get the house ready for sale. The inheritance was unexpected. Grandma Rose and I had been close when I was little, but college, career, and life had created distance. Now, at 28, I was a freelance graphic designer with an apartment lease ending in 2 months and a bank account that laughed at the idea of financial stability. This house was my chance to finally get ahead. The afternoon sun streamed through the living room windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny ghosts. Everything was exactly as I remembered from childhood visits. The burgundy velvet couch, the china cabinet filled with delicate teacups, the grandfather clock that had never kept proper time. Grandma Rose used to joke that the clock ran on house time, which was always a few minutes behind the rest of the world. I should have paid more attention to that joke. After an hour of walking through memories, I decided to check the basement. The real estate agent had mentioned something about the furnace needing inspection, and I wanted to make a list of repairs before calling contractors. The basement stairs creaked under my feet. The same 13 steps I'd counted as a child, too scared to go down alone but too curious to stay upstairs. The basement was exactly as I remembered. Concrete walls, exposed ceiling beams, that distinctive smell of old wood and dampness. The furnace hummed in one corner, surrounded by boxes of Christmas decorations and old furniture. But there was something else, something I'd never noticed as a kid. In the far corner, behind a stack of boxes labeled Rose's Teaching Supplies, there was a small door. Not a door, really, more like a hatch. It was maybe 3 feet high and painted the same white as the basement walls, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. A piece of masking tape was stuck to it, with "crawl space, pipes," written in Grandma Rose's careful handwriting. I'd helped my dad check crawl spaces in our own house growing up. They were always cramped, dirty spaces filled with insulation and spider webs. Nothing interesting. Nothing worth a second thought. But this felt different. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The hatch wasn't locked, just held shut by a simple latch. It opened with a soft click that seemed to echo longer than it should have. Cool air drifted out, carrying a scent I couldn't identify. Not musty or stale like you'd expect. More like fresh laundry mixed with something floral. Something that reminded me of childhood summers. The space beyond was larger than I'd expected. Not just a crawl space, but almost a small room. The ceiling was low. I'd have to duck to enter, but it extended back into darkness beyond my phone's light. Wooden support beams created a grid pattern overhead, and the floor was covered with what looked like old vinyl flooring, the kind with tiny geometric patterns that was popular in the 1950s. But here's the thing that made me pause. The thing that should have made me close that hatch and walk away. The space was warm. Not the damp cold you'd expect from a crawl space, but genuinely warm, comfortable, like someone had been heating it. I told myself it was just the furnace. Heat rises, right? Maybe the ductwork ran through there, but as I crouched down and poked my head inside, I realized there were no ducts, no pipes, no utilities at all, just space. Clean, carpeted space that stretched back into darkness. And photographs, dozens of them, scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. I should have left. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to close that hatch and forget I'd ever seen it. But curiosity won, the way it always does. I squeezed through the opening, my phone's flashlight casting dancing shadows on the walls. The photographs were everywhere, black and white, color, Polaroids, digital prints. Decades of pictures scattered across the floor in no apparent order. Some were face down, some curled at the edges, some looked fresh from the printer. I picked up the nearest one, a color snapshot of a woman I didn't recognize, standing in what looked like this very basement. She was middle-aged, with short brown hair and a nervous smile, wearing clothes that looked like they were from the 1980s. The next photo made my breath catch. It was Grandma Rose, but not the elderly woman I remembered. This was Rose as a young woman, maybe 25, wearing a blue dress and laughing at something outside the frame. She was standing in the living room upstairs, but the furniture was different. Older. Like the photo had been taken in the 1940s. But here's what didn't make sense. The photo was a modern digital print, the kind you get from a photo lab with that glossy finish and white border. How could a 1940s scene be printed on modern photo paper? I kept looking. There was a Polaroid of a man in a military uniform standing by the front door. A color photo of children playing in the backyard. Children wearing clothes from different decades. A black and white picture of a woman hanging laundry on a line that had never existed in this yard. And then I found the one that made my hands shake. It was me. Definitely me. I was maybe 12 years old, wearing a red winter coat I remembered having in 6th grade. I was standing in the kitchen upstairs, reaching for something on the counter. The photo was taken from behind, but I could see my face in the reflection of the microwave door. It was absolutely, undeniably me. But I'd never seen this photo before. I'd never posed for it. And the timestamp printed in the corner said December 15th, 1987. I was born in 1996. I sat back on my heels, staring at the impossible photograph. The rational part of my mind was running through explanations. Maybe it was my mom as a child. Maybe it was a cousin I'd never met. Maybe the timestamp was wrong, or the photo had been mislabeled. But deep down, I knew it was me. I knew because I remembered that coat. Remembered the way it felt too tight across my shoulders. I remembered the kitchen, the placement of the appliances, the exact pattern of morning light coming through the window. I remembered being 12. I just didn't remember being 12 in 1987. My phone buzzed with a text from my roommate asking how the house cleaning was going. The screen showed 4:47 p.m. I'd been in the crawl space for maybe 10 minutes, but when I'd entered the basement, it had been just after 3:30. Where had the time gone? I started gathering the photos, planning to take them upstairs where I could examine them properly. But as I reached for a stack near the back wall, my flashlight beam caught something else. Something that made my stomach drop. Carved into the wooden support beam, in letters that looked fresh despite the aged wood, were initials and dates. RM 1,943 inches. DK 1,962 inches. ML 1,978 inches. ST 1,987 inches. JP 1,995 inches. And below them, in handwriting I recognized as my own, SC 2,024 inches. But I hadn't carved anything. I'd never even been in this space before today, and the wood around my supposed carving looked as aged and weathered as the others. I needed air. I needed to get out of there and think. But as I turned to leave, backing toward the hatch on my hands and knees, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. The opening was gone. Not closed. Not blocked. Gone. Where the hatch should have been, there was just a solid wall. Old, weathered wood paneling that looked like it had been there for decades. No seams, no hinges, no evidence that there had ever been an opening at all. I was trapped. Panic hit me like a physical force. I pressed my hands against the wall where the hatch had been, running my fingers along the wood grain, searching for any sign of the opening. Nothing. The wall was solid, continuous, impossible. I pulled out my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. Not even one bar. The screen showed 4:47 p.m. The same time it had shown when I'd checked it before. The digital clock wasn't moving. I tried to think rationally. Maybe I'd gotten turned around. Maybe I'd crawled further into the space than I'd realized, and the hatch was in a different direction. The crawl space was bigger than it had first appeared. Maybe it wrapped around the basement's perimeter. I started crawling, methodically checking each wall. The space was rectangular, maybe 12 feet by 8 feet, with that low ceiling that forced me to stay on my hands and knees. But no matter how carefully I searched, I couldn't find the opening I'd used to enter. That's when I noticed the photographs had changed, not all of them. Most were still scattered across the floor where I'd left them, but new ones had appeared. A Polaroid of me, taken from above, showing me crawling across the floor with a confused expression. A digital photo of me examining the carved initials on the beam. A black and white picture of me pressing my hands against the wall, my face twisted with the beginning of panic. Someone was taking pictures of me. Right now. In this sealed space. But I was alone. I checked my phone again. Still 4:47 p.m. Still no signal. But the battery had dropped from 67% to 23% in what felt like minutes. Time was passing, but not in the way it should. I decided to sit still and think. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe the hatch was hidden by some kind of mechanism. Maybe the space was larger than I'd realized, with multiple chambers. Maybe... A sound interrupted my thoughts. Footsteps. Above me in the basement. Slow, deliberate steps moving across the concrete floor. "Hello?" I called out. "I'm down here. I'm trapped." The footsteps stopped, then resumed, moving toward the area where the hatch should be. I heard the scrape of boxes being moved, then the familiar click of the latch opening. "Thank God," I whispered, crawling toward the sound. But when I reached the wall, there was still no opening. The footsteps had stopped. The basement above was silent. I pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing. Then I heard my own voice, muffled but clear, coming from the other side of the wall. "Hello, I'm down here. I'm trapped." It was me. My exact words, my exact tone, my exact desperation. But I wasn't speaking. I was listening to myself speak, words I'd said moments before, playing back like a recording. The footsteps resumed, moving away from the hatch area. I heard the basement door open and close. Then silence. I looked at my phone. 4:47 p.m. 15% battery. The photographs on the floor had changed again. Now there were pictures of me listening at the wall, pictures of me checking my phone. Pictures of me sitting in the exact position I was sitting in now. But in the photos, I looked different. Older. Tired. Like I'd been here for hours or days or... I don't know how long. And then I saw the photograph that broke my mind. It was a wide shot of the entire crawlspace, taken from above as if the photographer was floating near the ceiling. But instead of showing one person, it showed dozens. Dozens of versions of me scattered across the floor in different positions, different clothes, different ages. Some were young, some were old. Some were dressed like me, some wore clothes from decades past. All of them were looking at photographs. All of them were pressing against walls. All of them were checking phones that showed the same time. 4:47 p.m. In the corner of the photograph, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure I recognized. Grandma Rose. But not the Rose I remembered. This was Rose as I'd never seen her. Middle-aged, wearing modern clothes, with an expression of profound sadness. She was watching all the versions of me with the look of someone who understood exactly what was happening. And in her hands, she held a photograph of her own. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at that impossible photograph. Time had become meaningless in that space. My phone showed 4:47 p.m. for what felt like hours, the battery percentage dropping steadily while the clock remained frozen. 10%, 7%, 3%. When the screen finally went dark, I was left with only the ambient light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The crawlspace had its own illumination, soft and warm, like late afternoon sun filtering through old curtains. That's when I started to understand. The photographs weren't random. They were telling a story. I began arranging them in chronological order, using the clothing and hairstyles and background details to create a timeline. What I discovered made my skin crawl. The house on Maple Street had been trapping people for decades. Not physically, not exactly, but temporally. The crawlspace was some kind of pocket, a place where time folded in on itself. People would enter, looking for storage space or checking on utilities, and find themselves caught in a loop, living the same moments over and over, aging slowly while the world above moved forward. The initials carved in the beam weren't left by visitors. They were left by residents. People who had lived in the house, discovered the crawlspace and become trapped in their own personal time loops. RM from 1943. Rose Martin, my grandmother's maiden name. She'd been the first. A young woman who'd stumbled into this space and spent subjective years learning how it worked, how to navigate it, how to eventually escape. But escape came with a price. The house remembered everyone who'd been trapped. It held pieces of them, fragments of their time, echoes of their existence. That's why there were photographs of me as a child, taken in 1987. Some version of me had been here before, trapped in this loop, living and aging and dying in a space between seconds. The woman in the 1980s clothes, the man in the military uniform, the children in the backyard. They were all people who had lived in the house, all people who had found this space, all people who had become unstuck in time. And Grandma Rose had been documenting it all. I found her journal hidden beneath a stack of photographs. The entries were written in her careful handwriting, but the dates were impossible. Some were from the 1940s, some from the 1990s, some from years that hadn't happened yet. But they told a coherent story. Day 1, found the space behind the boxes. Warm and comfortable, decided to explore. Day 15, the hatch sealed itself. No way out. Phone shows the same time no matter how long I wait. Day 47, discovered the photographs. They show things that haven't happened yet. Or things that happened differently. I think time works differently here. Day 89, saw myself in a photograph, but older, much older. Realized I might be here for a very long time. Day 203. The house is alive. It's been collecting people, collecting time. We're all here in different layers, different loops. Sometimes I can see them. Sometimes I can hear them. Day 1247. Found a way out, but it requires leaving something behind. The house needs an anchor, someone to maintain the loop. I think I understand now why the others stayed. Day 2190. I'm going to try to escape. If I succeed, I'll seal the space. I'll warn whoever inherits the house. I'll try to protect them. Day 2191. It didn't work. I'm still here. But I learned something important. The house doesn't trap people randomly. It traps people who are lost. People who are between things, people who don't quite fit in the world above. It offers them a place to exist outside of time. Day 2847. I'm leaving notes for the next person. Hidden in the photographs, carved in the wood, written in the shadows. If you're reading this, you're like me. You're lost. You're between things. The house sensed that and brought you here. Day 3000. I think I can get out, but I have to choose. I can escape back to my own time, but I'll be alone. The house will find someone else. Or I can stay and become the anchor and protect the next person who stumbles into this space. Final entry, I'm choosing to stay. When you find this journal, Sarah, remember that some prisons are also sanctuaries. Some traps are also gifts. The house has been waiting for you your whole life. You're here because you need to be here. Because above in the normal world, you're drowning. You're lost. You're running out of time. Here, you have all the time in the world. I set down the journal with shaking hands. She was right. I was lost. I was between things. My lease was ending. My career was stalling. My savings were gone. I'd been drifting for months, maybe years, pretending I had a plan, when really I was just trying to stay afloat. The crawlspace offered something different. A place outside of time, where I could exist without the pressure of moving forward, without the weight of an uncertain future. I could stay here, in this warm, comfortable space, and never have to worry about rent or deadlines or disappointment. I could stay here forever. But as I sat there, surrounded by photographs of people who had made that choice, I realized something Grandma Rose might not have understood. The house wasn't just trapping people who were lost. It was making them lost, creating the conditions that would drive them to seek escape from time itself. My financial problems, my career struggles, my sense of drifting. They hadn't been random. They'd been orchestrated. The house had been preparing me, shaping my life to make me vulnerable to its offer. I stood up as much as the low ceiling allowed and walked to the wall where the hatch should have been. The wood looked ancient, weathered, permanent, but I knew it wasn't. Nothing in this space was permanent except the choice to stay. I pressed my palm against the wood and spoke to the house, to the space, to whatever consciousness governed this place. I know what you're offering. I know what you want. But I'm not staying. The temperature dropped. The soft light dimmed. The photographs on the floor began to flutter as if caught in a wind that didn't exist. I'm not staying, I repeated, louder. You can't have me. I choose to live in time, not outside of it. I choose uncertainty over safety. I choose the risk of failure over the guarantee of stasis. The wall began to change. Seams appeared in the wood, outlining the shape of the hatch. The latch materialized, old brass gleaming in the dim light. But as I reached for it, I heard Grandma Rosa's voice, warm and sad. If you leave, someone else will come. Someone who needs this place more than you do. Someone who won't be strong enough to choose the difficult path. I paused, my hand on the latch. Then that's their choice to make, I said. I can't stay to protect people from their own decisions. I can't sacrifice my life to maintain someone else's prison. The latch turned, the hatch opened. Cool basement air rushed in, carrying the scent of concrete and old wood and the real world. I crawled through the opening, leaving the photographs behind. As I emerged into the basement, I heard the hatch click shut behind me. When I turned to look, there was just wall. Old, weathered wood paneling with no seams, no hinges, no evidence of an opening. But carved into the wood in letters that looked fresh despite the aged surface were new initials. SC2024, refused. I climbed the basement stairs on shaking legs, my mind reeling with what I'd experienced. The grandfather clock in the living room showed 4:47 p.m., exactly the same time it had shown when I'd first entered the crawlspace. But my phone, when I plugged it in and turned it on, showed a different story. According to the phone, it was 11:23 p.m. I'd been gone for almost 7 hours. I left the house that night and drove back to Chicago. I put it on the market the next week, selling it to a young couple who seemed excited about the vintage character and original features. I told them about the furnace, the plumbing, the grandfather clock that never kept proper time. I didn't tell them about the crawl space, because here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. The thing that makes me question everything I thought I understood about time and choice and the places we call home. I could have stayed. I could have chosen the warmth and safety of that space. Could have lived outside of time's relentless march forward. Part of me wanted to. Part of me still wants to. And sometimes, late at night, when the weight of bills and deadlines and uncertainty presses down on me, I wonder if I made the right choice. I wonder if the couple who bought the house will find that hatch. I wonder if they'll be strong enough to refuse what it offers. I wonder if anyone ever really is. But mostly, I wonder about the photographs I left behind. Because in that last moment, as I crawled through the hatch, I glimpsed one more picture on the floor. A photo I hadn't seen before, showing the crawl space empty except for scattered photographs and one small object in the center of the room. A brass key, the same key I'd used to unlock the front door of 1247 Maple Street. The key that was now in my pocket, despite the fact that I'd left it on the kitchen counter when I'd fled the house. So tell me, if you inherited a house with a crawlspace where time moves differently, what would you choose? The safety of forever, or the terrifying beauty of now? Because I have a feeling that key finds its way to people who need to make that choice. And if you're listening to this story, if you're drawn to tales of places where time bends and reality shifts, maybe it's already found you. Sweet dreams. Story number 4. The GPS kept saying recalculating as I drove through what should have been Main Street. But there was nothing there. Just an empty field stretching endlessly under the October sky. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I pulled over, staring at the coordinates on my phone. 42.360 1 degrees N, 83.0697 degrees W. These were the exact coordinates for Millbrook, Michigan, my hometown, the place where I spent the first 18 years of my life. But according to everyone else, according to every map, every website, every single person I've asked, Millbrook never existed. If you're listening to this right now, lying in your bed, maybe feeling that little chill run down your spine, I need you to understand something. This isn't just a story, this is my confession. And by the time I'm done telling it, you might start questioning your own memories too. The story begins now. I hadn't been back to Millbrook in 5 years. College in Ann Arbor, then a job in Chicago. Life had a way of pulling you forward, making you forget to look back. But when Mom called last Tuesday, something in her voice made my blood run cold. "Sweetie," she said. And there was this long pause. "Where did you say you grew up again?" "Very funny, Mom. Millbrook. Same place you've lived for 40 years. Another pause. Longer this time. "Honey, I live in Dearborn, always have. Are you feeling okay?" My apartment suddenly felt too small. The walls seemed to press in. "Mom, stop joking around. You live at 847 Elm Street in Millbrook. Dad's buried in Millbrook Cemetery. I went to Millbrook High School. I dated Jennifer Martinez sophomore year. I broke my arm falling off the jungle gym at Riverside Park when I was 7. Sarah." Her voice was different now, concerned, maybe even scared. "I don't know what you're talking about. Your father is buried in Dearborn. You went to Fordson High, and you'd never broken your arm." The phone slipped from my hand. That night, I didn't sleep. I pulled out my high school yearbook, except I couldn't find it. My diploma? Gone. Every photo from my childhood showed familiar faces in unfamiliar places. There was me at graduation, but the building behind me wasn't Millbrook High. It was some school I'd never seen before. I called my best friend Katie. We'd been inseparable since 3rd grade when she moved to Millbrook from Texas. "Millbrook?" she said, confusion thick in her voice. "Sarah, what are you talking about? We met in Dearborn, remember? Mrs. Patterson's class." By morning, I was in my car, driving back to where Millbrook should be. I had to see for myself. Had to prove I wasn't losing my mind. The drive from Chicago to Michigan usually took 4 hours. I'd done it dozens of times. I knew every exit, every rest stop, every small town along the way. But as I got closer to where Millbrook should be, nothing looked right. The exit 42, it wasn't there. I drove up and down I-94 3 times. Between exit 41 and exit 43, there was nothing but 14 miles of farmland. No exit 42, no signs for Millbrook. My GPS kept trying to reroute me to Dearborn. I finally pulled off at exit 43 and took the back roads. These roads were carved into my memory, left at the old barn with the faded mail pouch tobacco ad, right at the intersection where Tommy Chen crashed his dad's pickup junior year, straight past the cornfield where we used to go drink beer after football games. But the barn was different. The mail pouch ad was gone, replaced by fresh red paint. The intersection had a roundabout now. Modern, efficient, wrong. And the cornfield was a housing development. Cookie-cutter homes with perfect lawns and SUVs in the driveways. My hands shook as I turned onto what should have been Route 12, the road that led straight into downtown Millbrook. But instead of the familiar stretch of antique shops and the old movie theater, there was nothing. Just empty fields on both sides of the road. I pulled over where Main Street should have intersected Route 12. Got out of the car. The October wind whipped through the tall grass, making it whisper secrets I couldn't understand. This was wrong. All wrong. The Kroger, where Mom shopped every Saturday, gone. The park, where I had my first kiss, gone. The water tower with Class of 2012 rules spray painted on the side, gone. Not destroyed, not abandoned, just gone. Like they'd never existed at all. I walked into the field, my feet crunching through dried grass and fallen leaves. 50 yards in, I stopped. This should have been the exact spot where my house stood. 847 Elm Street. A 2-story colonial with white siding and black shutters. Dad's workshop in the garage, Mom's garden in the back. I fell to my knees and dug through the grass with my bare hands, searching for something. Anything. A foundation, a piece of concrete, an old pipe. But there was nothing except dirt and roots and rocks that had probably been there for centuries. That's when I saw it. Half buried in the earth, glinting in the afternoon sun. I pulled it free and my heart stopped. A class ring. Millbrook High School. Class of 2012. My class ring. The one I'd lost at senior prom. Jennifer had been wearing it on a chain around her neck, and somewhere between dinner and the last dance it had vanished. We'd searched everywhere. I turned it over in my palm. The initials were still there, worn but visible. SMP Sarah Marie Peterson. If Millbrook never existed, how was I holding my class ring? I didn't go to Dearborn, couldn't face seeing Mom and having her look at me like I was crazy. Instead, I got a room at a motel outside Ann Arbor and started searching. The internet had no record of Millbrook, Michigan. No Wikipedia page. No mentions in historical databases. Nothing in the state archives. I even paid for access to old newspaper archives. Newspapers I remembered reading as a kid. The Detroit Free Press, the Michigan Daily. They had articles about every small town in a 100-mile radius, but not one single mention of Millbrook. I searched for people instead. Jennifer Martinez. Should have been easy to find. She'd wanted to be a doctor, always posted everything on social media. But every Jennifer Martinez I found was wrong. Wrong age, wrong face, wrong life. Katie Summers, my best friend. I found her on Facebook, but her profile said she'd grown up in Dearborn. Her photos showed the same memories I had, but in different places. There we were at prom, but the background was some hotel ballroom, not Millbrook High's decorated gym. There we were at graduation. But the building was all wrong. I started calling numbers I remembered. The pizza place where I'd worked summers. Disconnected. The dentist who'd pulled my wisdom teeth, no such listing. The church where I'd gone to vacation Bible school, nothing. 3 days. 3 days of searching and finding absolutely nothing. That's when I noticed the pattern. Every search I did, within minutes, sometimes seconds, I'd get a call, unknown number. I never answered, but they always left the same voicemail, just breathing. Long, slow breathing. Like someone was standing right behind me. On the 4th day, I broke down and answered. "Stop looking," the voice said. It was distorted, electronic, impossible to identify. "Stop looking, or you'll forget too." Forget what? I practically screamed into the phone. What happened to my town? What happened to everyone? The breathing got heavier, closer somehow, even through the phone. "You're the only one who remembers," the voice said. "That makes you dangerous. Stop looking, Sarah. Stop looking before we make you stop." The line went dead. I threw the phone across the room and curled up on the motel bed, shaking. Who was we? What did they mean, make me stop? But I couldn't stop. How could I? Everything I was, everything I remembered, it all came from a place that apparently never existed. I decided to try a different approach. Physical evidence, there had to be something left, some trace that couldn't be erased. The next morning, I drove back to the empty field. This time, I brought tools. A metal detector I'd bought at a hardware store. A shovel. Work gloves. If I had to dig up the entire field, I would. The metal detector started beeping almost immediately. I dug carefully, my heart racing with each scoop of dirt. 6 inches down, I found it. A street sign, bent and rusted but still readable. Elm Street. I kept digging. Found more. A mailbox with 502 still visible on the side. A garden gnome that looked exactly like the one Mrs. Chen kept on her porch. A license plate, Michigan, but with a city designation I'd never seen on modern plates. Each piece I found made me dizzy, made my head hurt in a way that felt wrong, like my brain was fighting against itself. Part of me could see these objects clearly, remembered them perfectly, but another part, a growing part, kept insisting they couldn't be real. By afternoon I'd collected a dozen artifacts, proof that Millbrook had existed. I loaded them into my car, planning to take them somewhere. The police, the news, someone who would believe me. But when I got back to the motel, they were gone. The trunk was empty, no dirt, no rust stains, nothing to show I'd spent the day digging. Even the metal detector was gone. And the really terrifying part? For just a moment, just a split second, I couldn't remember what I'd been looking for. That night, the forgetting got worse. I'd be thinking about Millbrook, trying to hold on to some specific memory, and it would just slip away, like trying to hold water in your hands. I started writing everything down, filling notebook after notebook with every detail I could remember. The layout of downtown, the names of every store on Main Street, my teachers from kindergarten through senior year, the smell of the paper mill on humid summer days, the way the church bells sounded on Sunday mornings. But when I'd go back to read what I'd written, some of it was gone. Not erased, the pages were just blank, like I'd never written anything at all. That's when I realized I was being watched. A man in a gray suit, standing across from the motel, never moving, never looking away. When I'd blink, he'd be closer. When I'd look again, he'd be back where he started. I packed up and left. Drove for hours, taking random turns, doubling back, doing everything I could to lose him. Finally stopped at a truck stop near Toledo, exhausted and paranoid. The diner was nearly empty. Just me, the waitress, and a trucker in the corner booth. I ordered coffee and tried to think. Tried to make sense of what was happening. You look like you've seen a ghost. I jumped, spilling coffee across the table. The trucker had moved to the booth behind me without making a sound. "Sorry," he said. But he didn't look sorry. He looked interested. "Didn't mean to startle you. It's just, you have that look. The same look I had 3 years ago." "What look?" My voice came out as a whisper. He leaned closer. His eyes were bloodshot, darting constantly to the windows. Like you're trying to remember something that everyone else forgot. Like you know something's missing but can't quite put your finger on what. My hands started shaking again. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Shelbyville, Indiana," he said quietly. "Population 4,832, my hometown. Until one day, it wasn't. One day, I drove home from a long haul and found empty fields. Everyone I knew, everyone I loved, they all remembered different lives. Lives without Shelbyville." The coffee cup slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor. The waitress started over, but the trucker waved her away. "You're not crazy," he continued. "I've met 12 others like us over the years, people who remember towns that supposedly never existed. Burgess, Iowa, Ashford, Wyoming, Pleasant Valley, Maine, all gone. All forgotten by everyone except one person. But how?" I could barely get the words out. "How does an entire town just disappear?" He shook his head. "I've been trying to figure that out for 3 years, best I can tell. It started about 20 years ago, small towns at first, places nobody would miss. But it's getting worse. The towns are getting bigger, and the forgetting, it's getting stronger." He pulled out a worn notebook, flipped it open. Page after page of notes, maps, photos, but half the pages were blank, more than half. "I used to have proof," he said, touching the empty pages. "Photos of Shelbyville. Documents, even a few people who partially remembered, but it all fades. Give it enough time, and even we forget. No. I shook my head violently. No, I won't forget. I can't forget. My whole life. Your whole life will be rewritten, he said sadly. You'll wake up one day and remember growing up somewhere else. Remember different friends, different schools, different everything. And the scary part, those new memories will feel completely real. More real than the truth. He stood up, tossed money on the table for my coffee. There's a group of us. We try to help each other remember. Try to figure out what's happening. But we're losing. Every day, we lose a little more. He handed me a business card. It was blank, except for a phone number. Call if you want to fight, he said. But I'll warn you, fighting makes it worse. The more you resist, the more they notice you. And when they notice you... He didn't finish. Didn't have to. I'd already seen the man in the gray suit, already felt the memories slipping away. After he left, I sat there for a long time staring at the blank card, wondering if the number would still be there when I looked again, wondering if I'd remember why I'd come to this truck stop in the first place. The waitress refilled my coffee. You okay, hun? You've been staring at that napkin for 20 minutes. I looked down. I wasn't holding a business card, just a napkin, a blank napkin, and for the life of me, I couldn't remember what I'd expected to see there. I called the number. Don't ask me how I remembered it. Sometimes things stick in your mind even when everything else is falling apart. A woman answered on the first ring. Milwaukee, tomorrow, noon. The old brewery on 6th Street. Then she hung up. I drove through the night fighting to keep my memories intact. I'd say them out loud, over and over. My name is Sarah Peterson. I'm from Millbrook, Michigan. I went to Millbrook High. My parents are Robert and Linda Peterson. My dad died when I was 15. But even as I spoke, the words felt less real. By the time I reached Milwaukee, I had to check my driver's license to remember my middle name. The brewery was abandoned. Had been for years by the look of it. I almost turned back, walking into an empty building to meet strangers who might be as crazy as I was starting to feel. But what choice did I have? Inside, they were waiting. 7 of them, sitting in a circle of folding chairs like some kind of support group, which I guess is what it was. Sarah, the woman from the phone said. She was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and tired eyes. Welcome. I'm Linda. I froze. Linda? That's my mother's name. She smiled, sadly. Probably not a coincidence. Nothing is anymore. Sit. Tell us about your town. So I did. Told them everything I could still remember about Millbrook. They listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally like they'd heard it all before. When I finished, a younger man spoke up. Riverside, California. 2 years ago, 43,000 people gone overnight. His voice was flat, emotionless. I was visiting my sister in Phoenix when it happened. Came back to nothing. They all had stories. Towns erased, lives rewritten. Memories fading like old photographs left in the sun. But it was Linda who finally explained what they'd learned. It started in 2005, she said. Best we can tell, anyway. Something happened, something big, the kind of thing that should have been world news but wasn't. Because the first thing that disappeared wasn't a town. It was the memory of the event itself. What event? I asked. She shrugged. That's the problem. We don't know, can't know. It's been erased so thoroughly that even talking about it makes your head hurt. But whatever it was, it broke something. Changed the rules about what's real and what isn't. That doesn't make sense, I protested. You can't just delete reality. Can't you? The man from Riverside laughed bitterly. Tell me, Sarah, what color was your childhood home? White, I said automatically. White with black shutters. You sure? Close your eyes. Picture it. I did, and suddenly I wasn't sure. Was it white? Or was it blue? Had there been shutters at all? The harder I tried to remember, the less certain I became. That's how it works, Linda said gently. Reality isn't as solid as we think. It's more like consensus. We all agree on what's real, and that makes it real. But what happens when that consensus changes? When everyone suddenly agrees that something different is true? But we remember, I said. We know the truth. Do we? She pulled out a photo album, flipped it open. The pages were full of empty photo sleeves. I had pictures of my town, proof, but look at them now. Even when we manage to keep physical evidence, it fades, like reality itself is rejecting it. A man I hadn't noticed before spoke from the shadows. He was thin, gaunt, with hollow eyes that had seen too much. I've been fighting this for 15 years, he said. Lost my entire city, Cincinnati. 300,000 people gone. You probably think I'm insane. There's no way a city that big could just vanish, right? We all stared at him. Cincinnati was still there. I'd driven through it last year. He smiled, but there was no humor in it. See, even you don't believe me. Even people like us, who know the truth, we can't hold on to it. Cincinnati is gone. What you think is Cincinnati is just something else. Something that was put in its place. By who? I demanded. Who's doing this? The men in gray suits, Linda said. We've all seen them. Watching, waiting. They show up when someone remembers too much, when someone fights too hard. But who are they? Does it matter? The Cincinnati man laughed again, high and broken. They're winning. Every day, more towns disappear. Every day, more people forget. And the really sick part? The world keeps spinning. People adapt to the new reality without even realizing anything's changed. I thought about my mom, living in Dearborn now, with memories of raising me there, happy in her rewritten life. Was that really so bad? Yes, Linda said, like she'd read my mind. It's bad, because once you accept the lie, you can't fight anymore. And if we stop fighting, how long before there's nothing left? How long before every small town is gone? Then the cities? Then what? We talked for hours. Shared theories, compared notes, tried to make sense of the senseless. But as the sun started setting, they began to leave, one by one, slipping away into the growing darkness. Where will you go? I asked Linda as she gathered her things. Nowhere. Everywhere. She touched my shoulder gently. We keep moving, keep remembering, keep fighting. It's all we can do. But what's the point, if we're going to forget anyway? Maybe we will, she admitted. Maybe tomorrow I'll wake up and remember a different life. A normal life. But today I know the truth, and that has to count for something. After they left, I sat alone in the abandoned brewery, trying to decide what to do. Go back to Chicago, pretend everything was normal, or keep searching for answers that might not exist. That's when I saw him. The man in the gray suit standing in the doorway. But this time he wasn't alone. There were dozens of them, hundreds, all identical, all watching me with the same empty expression. Sarah Marie Peterson, they said in unison, their voices creating an inhuman harmony. You have been selected for cognitive realignment. I ran, burst through a side door and ran like I'd never run before. But they didn't chase me, didn't have to, because I could already feel it starting. The forgetting. My name was Sarah. Sarah something. From somewhere in Michigan? Or was it Ohio? I had parents probably, friends whose faces were already blurring. I made it to my car, fumbled for the keys with hands that didn't quite feel like mine. Had to get away, had to what? Why was I in Milwaukee? Why was I so scared? I found a notebook in my car, filled with my handwriting. Stories about a town that never existed, people who'd been erased, crazy stuff. Fiction, obviously, had to be. But then why was I crying? If you're still listening, if you made it this far, I need you to do something for me. Remember this story, even if it sounds insane, even if tomorrow you wake up and it seems like just another creepy tale you heard online, because I can feel myself slipping away. In a few hours, maybe less, I'll be someone else. Someone who grew up in Dearborn, went to Fordson High, never broke her arm because she never fell off a jungle gym that was never built in a park that never existed. But right now, in this moment, I remember the truth. I remember Millbrook, and if you're lying in your bed, maybe feeling that little chill again, maybe wondering if your own memories are as solid as you think they are, do me a favor. Think about your hometown. Picture it clearly. The streets, the buildings, the people. Now, ask yourself, are you absolutely sure it's really there? Are you sure it ever was? Because I was sure too. And now, I'm not sure of anything at all. They're here, outside my motel room. I can see their shadows under the door. So many shadows. Too many for the number of feet I can hear. In a minute, they'll come in, and Sarah Peterson from Millbrook, Michigan will cease to exist. But maybe, if you remember this story, maybe some small part of the truth will survive. Wait, I just remembered something. Something important. When I was 14, there was this old woman who lived at the end of Elm Street, Mrs. Kowalski. Everyone said she was crazy because she used to stand in her yard and talk to houses that weren't there. She'd wave at empty lots, call out names of neighbors nobody recognized. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she'd say to the vacant space next to her house. "Beautiful roses this year." We laughed at her. Kids would dare each other to ring her doorbell and run. But now I understand. She remembered the houses that used to be there, the people who used to live in them, a previous erasure we never even knew about. God, how many times has this happened? How many layers of reality have been stripped away? The doorknob is turning, they're not even knocking. They never knock. But I need to tell you one more thing, the most important thing. Last year, or what I think was last year, I had this dream. At least, I thought it was a dream. I was standing in a place that felt familiar but looked completely wrong. A massive city where Millbrook should have been. Skyscrapers stretching into clouds, millions of people, flying cars. And in that dream, I met myself. An older version. She looked at me with such sadness and said, "This is the 15th time. The 15th time you figured it out. And each time they make us forget and start over, but you're getting stronger. Each time you remember a little longer, fight a little harder." "Why me?" I asked her. "Because you were there when it started. Patient zero of remembering. The first person to notice when the first town disappeared. They can't completely erase you without unraveling everything else. So they just reset you. Again and again. The door is opening. I can see them now. The men in gray suits. But behind them, there's something else. Something that hurts to look at. Like reality folded in on itself. Like a hole in the shape of a person. It's speaking, but not with words. The meaning just appears in my head. The experiment concludes. Reality variant 247 has been contaminated. Initiating reset protocol. All anomalous memories will be purged. Timeline will resume from checkpoint November 15th, 2019. 2019? But that's before I left Millbrook. That's before any of this started. They're going to make me live it all again. The discovery, the investigation, the forgetting. Over and over until I stop fighting, until I accept the new reality without question. But jokes on them. Because I've hidden something. Something they won't find. Carved into trees across 12 states. Scratched into bathroom stalls, written in library books. 2 words that won't mean anything to anyone. Except to me, next time around. Remember Millbrook. Maybe I'll see it. Maybe it'll trigger something. Maybe the 16th time will be different. The gray suits are reaching for me now. Their hands are cold, so cold they burn. But I'm not scared anymore, because I finally understand what that old trucker meant. We're not the crazy ones. We're the immune system, reality's way of fighting back against whatever's trying to reshape it. And even if they make us forget, even if they reset us 1,000 times, we'll keep remembering, keep fighting, because the truth is like water. It always finds a way through. Tell others. Share this. Ask questions. Wonder about the towns that might have been erased from your own state, your own memories. Check your old photos. Do the backgrounds look right? Do you remember taking them? Are you sure? And if you ever meet someone who remembers a place that isn't on any map, someone who insists their hometown just vanished, someone who looks at empty fields with tears in their eyes, believe them. Before it's too late, before we all forget, before we all... Static, a different voice, mechanical and distant. Subject 247 secured. Memory wipe in progress. Timeline reset authorized. Beginning playback of cover story in 3, 2, 1. A cheerful, clearly artificial voice. Hi there. Thanks for listening to Creepy Tales for Cozy Nights. We hope you enjoyed this completely fictional story about false memories and disappeared towns. Remember, this is all just make-believe for your entertainment. If you like this story, please like and subscribe. And don't forget to check out our other totally fictional, definitely not real stories about things that absolutely never happened. Sweet dreams.